Hello, everyone, and welcome to day number 7 of our 8 days of awe. The days of awe are the 10 days that include Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we are here live on Facebook for the 8 days in between. And each day we've looked at a different aspect of awe as it relates to different soul traits. Well, today we're talking about the soul trait of honor, and specifically how that relates to family. Family can be wonderful, and family can be full of heartbreak. I used to say when I was getting married and when all my friends were getting married, that there's nothing like a marriage to bring out every issue that ever comes up in your family. You know, if your parents fight, or if your parents are divorced, or if they fight over a certain issue, it's going to come up at some point during the family dynamics. I did a survey of people who are on my email list about 5 months ago, and I asked them what the biggest issues were that they faced, and I was really shocked at the number of family issues that came up. I thought we were talking about personal transformation. Well, for them, the issue that was front and center for many people was family relationships. So I'm going to talk about the soul trait of honor today, but I'm also going to talk about it in the context of family. And there's really 3 elements within family that comes up. The first has to do with having a serious break in your family. You know, people shared with me so deeply from the heart. You know, people whose adult children didn't speak to them, and people who had not ever held their grandchildren because of a break with their adult child. And so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about those sort of very serious family breaks and what to do about them. Okay, secondly, we're going to talk more generally about dealing with adult children, and then we're going to talk about dealing with kids in the home. But I want to say that as we're talking about these relationships, these same principles apply as they relate to the soul trait of honor. And it's true, and there are lessons for all of our relationships, whether it's with a spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend or a coworker. It all has to do with how we treat other people. So in my book, The Spiritual Practice of Good Actions, which I happen to have right here, and maybe we'll look at a section from it, I start every chapter where we talk about a soul trait with an assumption. We don't have time to learn the whole. Many of us who grew up in a more secular Jewish environment, we don't have the time to go to yeshiva and learn the whole Jewish backstory. So what I did, I've created 4 assumptions to make that easier. And one of those assumptions is that we all have a divine spark, but it's occluded by our baggage. So a divine spark, this comes from the idea that, you know, we were created in the divine image. And as I shared in one of the earlier Facebook Lives, not only were we created in the divine image, we were told that we were created in the divine image. So this means that, you know, we have this great gift of, wow, I have all of this going on. I have a lot I can live up to. I have everything that I need. But we have the other side of the equation too, which is our baggage. Baggage, these are the hurts or the things that happen in life which leave scars on the heart. Part of the season of the days of awe is opening our heart a little bit, trying to soften those scars, not to let the divine light shine through. And that's what we do in Mussar. We're trying to let the light shine through. But let me tell you, what's the number one place that the baggage comes from? It's family interactions. You know, the way that we grew up, the things that happened when we were as a kid, or the things that happened in our dating relationships or in our friendship, those are the things that really leave scars. Yes, sometimes we can be traumatized by a hurricane or by an accident or something else, but in my experience, more often than not, the really deep hurts come from other people. Okay, so honor is, the Hebrew word is kavod, and it has to do with honoring the divine spark in someone else. So as we in the American Mussar approach is we look at each soul trait on a spectrum. So here's a little drawing or cartoon of the soul trait of honor. And if we have too little honor for other people, which is what happens when we're over here, we tend to be very rude. We can be dismissive and disrespectful and discounting and devaluing of other people. But if we tend towards the other side of the spectrum, where we have too much honor, we can end up flattering other people, being obsequious to them. And in a family dynamic, whether you're being rude to relatives or whether you're excessively flattering them, both of those lead to an unhealthy and imbalanced relationship. And so working on our own soul trait of honor can help us build those relationships. So how can this help us if we're in one of these situations where we have a serious break, where our child is not speaking with us, when a sibling isn't speaking with us, or if maybe we're on the other side of that, where we're not talking to another relative because we're so angry or there's been so much pain in that relationship. How do we deal with that? Well, this is like, I have to say, like when I first heard this, I'm like, geez, how am I going to address this issue? I'm a freelance spiritual seeker. These are heavy duty issues where often the help of professionals needs to come into play. I think when we look at these through a spiritual lens, the first question we need to ask is, as painful as it may be, if we're ready to ask this, is what have I done to contribute to this situation? And there may be some cases where anything that we've done is really not that big a deal. I mean, there may be cases where it really is about the other person's issue or the person's spouse and their issues. So maybe our contribution is minimal. But maybe we've made a contribution. Maybe we've had our own baggage, which expressed itself in how we relate to the kids. And we'll talk about sort of relationships with adult children next, where we can say, okay, well, maybe there are some patterns that we can head off so that we can avoid some kind of a situation later. And if we really are in that heartbreaking situation, what some people do is they do what's called mitzvah therapy. I love this term, mitzvah therapy, which is, okay, I'm not having that loving relationship with my children or my grandchildren, but I'm trying to form helpful and loving relationships with other people by volunteering, by connecting with others to kind of get that love and connection that all of us need. And if we're in that situation where it's one of these tragic situations where it's not there within our own family, then Yom Kippur and these days of awe are an opportunity to say, okay, well, where else can I get that? Do I just want to turn inward and be angry and heartbroken and never connect with anybody else again? That's, in the Torah it says the whole reason why Eve was created was because God didn't want Adam to be alone. Now, whether you believe in the divinity or not, there's still a lesson. As humans, we need other people. Even if we're introverts, we don't want a lot of people. We don't want a lot of people all the time. But we still want to have our close friends, our people that we can connect with. So, so for these serious breaks, again, it's looking within, it's finding love other places, and trying to maintain hope. I was in a break with a relative of mine for a number of years, someone very close to me. We didn't speak. And I still carry a lot of, some hurt and pain from that. But we've also healed, and we've also come back together. And for a while it seemed really hopeless, and then things changed. Okay, so the second family dynamic let's talk about is, what about adult children? And there have been a lot of people in my Mussar groups who have had struggles with adult children. And my children are still teenagers. I'm not at this stage yet, but it has become very clear to me that the parenting does not end when they leave the house. Sometimes kids come back, but even when they don't, they're still parenting that's going on. And I think the issues, again, often have to do, often kavod is a good place to start. Because one of the things that we're taught, there's a lesson from Rabbi Hillel who said, do not judge another person unless you've stood in their shoes. Well, guess what? It's impossible for us to stand in someone else's shoes. Maybe kind of sometimes I've sort of been in a situation or a situation which seems really like the situation the other person's in, but you haven't been in every situation they've been in. They may handle it very differently than you do. So it's very easy to get hung up on judging our adult kids and they should be doing this and they should be doing that. And I don't like their friends. And the thing to remember is their divine spark. That once they're adults and once they have left, really trying not to judge them. You don't have to approve of it. You don't have to support it, but try not to judge it. Now, and when we keep judging our kids, it hurts their self-esteem and it hurts that relationship. Now, on the other side, maybe we're giving too much honor to the kids. Maybe they're rude to us. Maybe they just expect to come over whenever they want and to have you cook dinner for them and never help with the cleanup, and it's just a one-sided relationship. And that would be giving too much honor. That would be giving too much kavod to the other. And it's time to ask for what we need and to ask for some reciprocity and to help them develop the sort of skills and respect for others that they need. So with adult kids, again, practicing honor is one of the real ways that we can help. Okay, so now, what about parenting kids in the home? And this is where my most recent experience is. I have 2 teen daughters, and about a year ago, I said, I need to start developing Mussar parenting because this is hard. This is a challenge, dealing with them. And the challenge, yeah, they're 2 great kids. Okay, I just want to say that. But any teenager is going to be a challenge. But the challenges are often about me. It's about how do I respond. And another parent, some of these things they do aren't going to bother us. So Wendy Levine, the great author who wrote Blessings of a Skinned Knee and Blessings of a B-, she uses this great Yiddish term, mishigas. It's kind of like our stuff. Right? We all have our mishigas, our stuff that we deal with. Or stuff that's inside. And when we don't deal with it, it kind of pollutes our actions and it pollutes our activities. So our kids learn from modeling our behavior. So there's a story about someone who went to the rabbi and said, I tell my kids all the time to study Torah, but they don't want to study it. What can I do? And so the rabbi said, well, you need to study Torah yourself. Otherwise, your kids are going to grow up to be people who talk about studying Torah, but don't study it themselves. And the same thing holds true in all areas of parenting. If you want to have menschy kids, you have to try to be a mensch yourself. Mussar is a wonderful way to do that. Mussar parenting, we can really talk about the issues, the spiritual challenges that we have as being parents. And a lot of it, again, has to do with the soul trait of honor. When my kids were little, I used to get so frustrated that they would take forever to get out the door. And it's like, put on your shoes, put on your backpack, come on. Ah. Well, guess what? All that yelling and frustration, that didn't get anybody out the door faster. It made them upset. It made me upset. And there was one day I was practicing honor for the first time, and suddenly they were messing around and not doing their stuff. And suddenly I just envisioned them these 2 little divine sparks. And they were both in elementary school, and I just calmed. And I just sort of started joking around with them. And it didn't slow things down, and if anything, it made things faster. But it's just a totally different way of showing up for me, and it really made a big difference. Now, the problem is that if we start judging our kids, if we start expecting them to do more than they can do, it can really mess them up. I mean, it can really hurt their self-esteem. And if we don't support them and love them for who they are, if we don't give them enough honor, then they're going to become the type of person who does what's called chasing honor. Chasing honor is really trying to say, like, hey, look at me, look at all this great stuff that I've done. Because what Mussar and Judaism teach us is that who is honored? One who honors other people. And when I first heard that, it really confused me, because I was in the corporate world. I was very much into attention seeking and having to learn, you know what, just let it go. Just focusing on honoring other people, and then honor will come back to you. And so if we don't honor our children for who they are, then they're going to not have everything that they need. Now, none of us are perfect, and if you're starting to feel guilty about this right now, it's okay. It's Yom Kippur. It's the high holiday season. It's an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to do things differently. So how can we go about practicing honor then, generally, in ways that can help us with our family relationships? Well, one thing to remember is that when we practice honor, we're helping heal our own soul. And when we heal the soul in one part of our life, it's going to help us in other parts. So one honor practice that I found challenging as someone who has a big honor imbalance was to praise 3 people a day. And I write about this in the book, that the first time that I had this practice, it was really hard for me to do. And I realized, and just as I'm sitting here talking about this, do I praise my kids? Do I don't want to butter them up and give them the participation trophy, but do I genuinely praise them for the things that they do well, and the things that are important to them that they do well, and the things that are important to me when they're living up to the values that I want? Have I praised them enough? Have you praised your adult children? Or have you praised your siblings? Or have you praised your parents? You know, one of the 10 Commandments is honor your mother and father. How have you done with that? It's a good question we can ask ourselves. Have we honored our relatives? And have we honored our parents most of all? That's one thing to think about, is looking for opportunities to praise other people, and praise 3 people a day, and at least one of them, make it a relative. Find a way to praise a relative once a day. And the second practice I want to give you, and the thing I want to leave you with, has to do with shame. As it says in the book of Proverbs, one who disgraces his fellow is heartless. And Brene Brown talks a lot about shame in her books, and shaming other people is just like a killer for self-esteem, and it's a killer on relationships. And so there's a way to give criticism and feedback to someone without shaming them. And when we shame our kids, or when we shame our parents and relatives, it doesn't do anything but build division. So the great modern Mussar teacher Alan Moranis, in one of his books, he has this great recitation phrase, there's another side to the story. And it again harkens back to this teaching from Rabbi Hillel, which is that we don't want to judge someone else until we've been in their shoes. And since we can never be in their shoes, judging other people is not okay. That doesn't mean we have to agree with them. It doesn't mean we need to support them. It doesn't mean there can't be consequences for the behavior. But it's almost akin to the saying, hate the sin, love the sinner. We don't want to judge them as a person. We want to hold them accountable for their behavior. And if we're too harsh on the behavior, we need to look within and saying, do I really, why am I so upset by what this person did? Is it really so terrible? Is it something I can live with? Is it something we can work out or talk through? Well, thank you so much for being here today. I will post this. This will be available on replay. Tell me what you think. If you are, was this helpful to you? If you are struggling with a family situation, either with an adult kid or with a sibling or with a current parent, please feel free to send me a message. Tell me what's going on, and I'll do my best to support you and point to some teachings that might help you through. Bye-bye.